Hello and welcome to this webinar regarding Google G Suite backups. It's hosted by Refractive in conjunction with G Suite Tips. And my name is Sean Power and I'm one of the customer consultants here at Refractive. This is our agenda today for today's session. We'll discuss the reasons why organizations using SaaS products such as G Suite, why they choose third-party products to back up their data, and also try and compare that to the standard Google data security processes so you can get an idea of how they differ. We'll explore how these backup solutions work in practice, and then we'll show you them working in action so you can get an idea and a look behind the hood to see where things are. During the session, you can ask any questions which you may have in the chat box, which is in the upper right-hand corner of the YouTube page. Any we can't answer, will, due to lack of time, we'll get back to after the session and we'll respond directly. Talking about timing, we've scheduled 30 minutes for the session today, so we do have time to get through and should have time for questions. And we've got plenty to get through, so we'll make a start. There is no doubt for those of you who've been using G Suite for any amount of time that Google looks after your data. There have not been any recorded incidents where actions by Google have resulted in G Suite users losing data. They have a very robust and secure methodology in place to ensure your data is preserved and can be accessed when you want it. Take this document, for example, and the same applies to any type of asset, an email or a calendar invite, etc. The first action Google undertakes is to encrypt the document while it's both at rest, while it's on your machine and while it's in the Google data center, but also while it's in transit between data centers and down to your local device. And this means that the data it contains is not in plain sight and needs a security key to be able to see it. Once this is done, once it's encrypted, the asset is shredded into many small components. And this means that the document never really exists in its entirety in one location, in one place. Now, as you're probably aware, Google have an extensive data center network, and this is where they hold your G Suite data. And these are the same data centers as those which manage the Google search application, as long as others such as YouTube, civilian Gmail accounts, Chrome and Android, etc. And Google indeed has 7 products with over 1 billion active users, and they're all managed within this extensive data center network. So your shredded asset is sent to a number of data centers, and it's also replicated across them many times in many different locations, but it never really exists in complete in any single one data center. So if someone broke into a Google data center and walked away with a rack of servers, the information to them would be useless. And similarly, if some natural event occurred and the data center was taken out, then no data would be lost because it's replicated, as I mentioned, in multiple data centers. So when you want to view that asset again, Google pulls it from the various data centers where it is located, and stitches it together, and it allows you to see and interact with it as you would ordinarily do. So this is the process, usually hidden from a user because you don't get involved in this type of thing, and all you see is your document, which you create and access and interact with, and everything else works behind the scenes. So if this architecture is so robust and Google never loses data, why are we discussing the need for a backup solution, you may ask? Well, anything deleted from a user account will remain in the recycle bin for 30 days. And after that, it is gone forever. So if a user does delete a document or an email and you notice that it's missing and you do want it back, within the 30 days, you can reclaim it. Outside that 30 days, it's simply not there. And there are a number of reasons why this can happen, why data may be lost from your G Suite accounts. But these fall really into 2 main categories, accidental deletion and malicious intent. So accidental deletion can occur really for many reasons, including users deleting a file which they later need So they thought they didn't need it, but then find out later they did. And it could also be through the introduction of a third-party application which deletes data and your assets unnecessarily. And this is becoming more and more common as more applications are attached to your G Suite environment to extend what G Suite can do out of the standard product to add functionality. Malicious intent, on the other hand, can be from both internal staff but also external contacts. And this is especially through malware and ransom attacks. So whichever type of loss of data or attack you suffer from, what a backup solution allows you to do will be able to restore the data you want from the archive which it creates, and it will do it efficiently and quickly to assure minimum loss of time for both the user and the administration team. So let's take a quick look at how they work in practice, just by looking at their architecture. So as you saw earlier, all your G Suite data is held on the Google Cloud platform, just like all the other Google products. This is a cloud-based infrastructure owned, managed, and operated by the Google team. A third-party backup solution has access to your data and uses this authority to pull data from the Google infrastructure to another external, typically external platform. This is mostly open cloud platforms like Amazon, Azure, and even in a different area of Google Cloud Platform. Some backup services use a private cloud infrastructure to store your data, particularly the larger providers who have the demand to warrant the level of investment needed. But whichever method you use, essentially you're pulling information from your infrastructure, from the Google infrastructure, and out of your Google accounts into a separate area for safekeeping. And this data is effectively copied across, so it doesn't affect the original. And most backup services keep a record of all backups and restores, and they allow you to restore your data to a point in time in the past. This works particularly well in ransomware attacks because you can restore data from a time before the attack infected your assets. And just finally on this, there is usually the option that you can actually pull data out of the Google environment onto your on-premise infrastructure if you so wish. Again, it's the same process. We're just keeping it in a safe place. Now, we would argue that the cloud backup services are more effective and more secure. But if your regulations or your data policies dictate that you keep data on site, then there is the option to be able to do this. Okay, so you may have within your G Suite environment a product called Google Vault, and quite often this is often confused, and you may think that you're protected and already backing up your G Suite data if you do have Google Vault as part of your G Suite service. However, you are not backing up this data, and I'll explain why. So Vault is an excellent and really good archiving and e-discovery tool. And it's provided with certain versions of G Suite, particularly business and enterprise, and also education. And it's also available as an add-on for basic licenses. And it automatically traps all inbound and outbound emails and any documents created or shared with your users. And it traps them into an archive in a secure area. This archive is retained for a specified period of time, and that length of time is dictated by your security policies. How long do you need to retain data, for instance? And it simply cannot be deleted until this point in time is reached. So it is possible to restore individual items into a user account using Vault, but it isn't possible and very not suitable for restoring a whole account. And it doesn't have any point in time capabilities. So it's missing some fundamental functionality that true backup and restore services have. It does a great job of quarantining data and creating legal matters in HR or contractual issues, but it does not provide a suitable service for backup or restores. So even if you have Vault, you should still consider a backup service. So what are the benefits of using a backup service for your G Suite environment? Well, it's got many benefits, really, particularly for administrators, but also for users. And the benefits for administrators sit mostly around the category of securing your G Suite data without adding complexity to the administration function. So you'll be able to easily add additional users without changing processes or endangering backup windows or increasing administration time or any of the other dangers involved. And monitoring your health of the backups is also an important factor. Relying on backups which are not functioning correctly can lead to serious consequences. And most professional backup services will provide this level of detail and give you confidence in the data that you are backing up, and particularly its health. And in addition, audit trails will ensure that the backup and restore function is not being used for nefarious means. You will know who performs manual backups and restores and check for unwarranted use. And from a user perspective, it just means your data is safe and secure and backed up if ever anything happens to that data. And it's also a seamless process for users. So you don't have to interact with it at all in order for the data to be secured. Okay, so I'm going to show you how the backup service could work for you, and we'll work through a couple of examples. I'm using for this demonstration one of the leading solutions in this area called Spanning, but the process is for other services relatively straightforward and similar to the Spanning process. So I'll work through the demonstration. I'll just come out of the presentation, and here I am in the login portal. You notice that Spanning also do backup for other SaaS products like Salesforce and 365 if you're operating in those worlds. But it's easy for me. This is a demonstration environment that I'm on, but I'm just going to sign in with my Google account. So it knows who I am. It's pre-authorized. I've already got an account, so it's all really easy for me to access the portal. And I've got administration privileges to this portal. So again, I can see what the situation is. First thing that happens whenever I log in, it tells me how many accounts I've got unprotected. Now, as I said, this is a demonstration domain. So I've got lots of unprotected accounts, but there's no valuable data in there. There is no need to back up this information. A couple of things I can do as an administrator. First of all, I can look at status. And what this status shows me is how many times I've had a problem backing up my data. So it clearly identifies I've had a problem today. Now, if I can look down here, I can see what this is. And one problem just means that there is one email message out of the tens of thousands which we're backing up, or one document which we've had a problem with. And I can turn this on and off as I need to. So there may be occasions that I can find higher levels. There we go, higher levels of errors. So this is something that I might want to investigate as an administrator, just to see what's going on. But you notice that for this account, all data is being backed up subsequently. Just a quick note, if there's no changes to data, i.e. no additional information, no additional assets, and no changes to those assets, then no backup is performed. So we're taking the delta between where we backed up yesterday and where we are today. In the settings tab, I can dictate how the system backs up my data. So first major criteria that I've got is, do I allow non-administrators to log in and perform backups and export data? You can see I can get quite granular with this, so I can turn off the ability for them to export data, or indeed just not allow them to access and leave that as an IT administration process, which is quite common. I can decide how I'm backing up my drive data. And you notice we've got the ability, most of these services now, to back up team drives, which is useful if you've got access to that service. And I can also dictate, can I see previews for my email? And again, we talked about previously with Vault about a retention policy. So I can automatically delete my data from my backups if I want to after a specified period of time. And that's usually either 3 or 7 years, depending on what industries you operate in. I can clearly get a notification to see what's happening with all my backups. And I can get that, as you see, daily, weekly, or monthly, depending on how interactive I want it to be. And then there's further settings about billing, etc., and backups and administrators. So I can add admins. I've got different roles that people can access in here. So I can get quite granular in terms of what users can do. Mentioned earlier about an audit log. So an audit log really looks at what's happening with this account and what's been going on. And you can see that those changes that I've made have just appeared within the audit log, because that might be interesting. There's some user restores taking place, and there'll be another as we progress to the demonstration. And there's even an export here. So that's something I may be interested in looking at to see whether that's a valid export or does it breach my security policies. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch to one of my users. So I'm basically defining and viewing my Spanning account as my user. I get similar information, so I know when failures have occurred, which can be quite useful. Tells me when the last backup occurred, and that was this morning in this morning's session. And it also tells me conveniently timed, this is backing up now. So I'm hoping that doesn't interfere with what we are doing. If I go back to the settings tab, so this is my personal settings. So I can decide, do I want to back up all my emails, or do I want to remove some with particular labels? Might be quite interesting. I can do similar things for documents. So not any documents shared with me that I don't own, don't back that up. And again, I've got granular control over calendars and contacts, etc. I've also got a history, and this history tells me what's been going on for this particular user. So has any backups occurred? Have any restores occurred, and what happened, and what was the content in here? And I can filter these by date, time, type, results, etc. Anything that I want to find that information. What I'm particularly interested in is the restore function here. So this is essentially looking at my inbox at the moment. Could be looking at my Google Drive documents, as you can see here, or my calendars or contacts or sites, etc. But I'll concentrate on email at the moment. And then what I've got the option is, if I come over here to my Gmail account, you see I've got 3 messages here. Well, we saw them that they were existing within the backup. But actually, you know what, just as a test, let's get rid of these messages. So I can select those, delete those messages, come down here to the recycle bin, because, as I said before, if I delete a message or a document, it sits in the recycle bin for 30 days. Well, actually, I just want to get rid of them completely. And you get this interesting message, delete forever. And you'll see that they've gone from my account. So now if I come back over here to my backup, I can select these messages because they still exist within my backup, and I can restore. And I can add a particular label onto the message. Interestingly, with Spanning in particular, I can restore to a different account, which can be really useful. Not all services have that, but that can be quite handy. And I click done. And it's been submitted. You can see down here, it's been successfully queued, and you'll see the progress over here. Now I'm only backing and restoring 3 messages. So clearly it happens very quickly. But there are times when I'm undertaking a restore for a whole account, which is obviously going to take longer. And you see here, we've got our messages back. They've got this label created with those those messages. And I've got a notification to say the restore has been complete. So now if I go back into my admin panel and I look at history, you'll see that we've now got a restore here for around about this time. So that's kind of how a backup service works. It's typically an administration function, although users can have access if you want them to. But it's done on such an infrequent basis, and it's so important when it is undertaken that usually we advise that it's an IT function if you have an IT department within your organization. Okay, so that's all I want to show you within the product itself. I'll come back to the presentation. So hopefully that's given you a good idea of why you should be considering a backup service for your operation. It's just about you've got valuable data from your users held within your G Suite environment, and you want to make sure you can get that data back in case of any accidental or malicious deletion. And as we've seen before, that can come from all sorts of different directions. So we will send an email after the session to everybody who attended, and then have a copy of this recording, and also details on how you can trial the services if you want to explore them further, which can be quite useful and a good way for you to get to know how the backup services work. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for attending. I do appreciate it, and hope to see you on future events. Thank you.